I have a system that I use that allows me to save as much money as possible on clothes while still having a reasonable wardrobe for my children that isn't too excessive and isn't too bare bones. And so my first part of my system, which I have not recorded because I didn't realize I was going to make this video, is that I go through all of my kids' clothes for the season. And what that entails is I will make sure my kids clean the majority of their clothes, because all my children, except for my youngest, do their own laundry. My youngest doesn't do his own washing fully because he can't reach all the way into the washer. He can put his clothes in the washer and then I take them out and put them in the dryer. All that being said, they all wash their clothes, so we get everything as much as possible clean, except for maybe the outfit they're wearing and a little bit of laundry that maybe isn't enough to make a full load. Then what we do is I make sure they put all their clothes away. So overall, they put them all up, and then we systematically go through each category of clothing, and I start keeping track. And all I use is a notebook, and I'm not sure if this is going to be backwards for you, so apologies if it is. I am not used to recording things on video, so I don't know how this shows up. But basically, I will put the name of the kid or their initials or what have you. Each kid gets their own page, so I have 4 pages because I have 4 kids. And what I do is I start with, say, socks. And I make sure that they have, we count all the pairs of socks that they have that don't have holes or are threadbare or whatever. We throw away anything that's bad, and irreparable, and we pair them up. And I make sure, typically, so my minimum amount of clothing for each child is a week's worth of clothes with maybe an extra thing or two. Because they do their own laundry, I tend to not want them to have too many clothes, because what happens if they have too many clothes is that they wait to do their laundry, and then we have a basket full of dirty clothes, and then they don't, and so it just piles up. And so to keep it from piling up, to help my children plan and execute well, we make sure we don't have too many clothes. So minimum is obviously 7 pairs of socks, 7 pairs of underwear, that kind of thing. Now, they're going to camp for 2 weeks, so obviously 7 pairs of everything is not going to work. There is a laundry service, but I don't want to rely entirely on that, or making sure that that happens, to ensure that they have enough clean clothes for camp. So camp sends us a list, which I don't have with me, but I do have it on my phone. They have a list that tells how many pairs of socks and underwear are their minimum requirements. And so we are fulfilling that requirement for summer. Obviously it'd be different in the winter. They're not going to camp for 2 weeks, so I don't carry as much load of clothing in their closets for winter. So they are getting, my oldest, we count all the socks. We make sure that all the socks that are in his drawer are his socks, because sometimes my kids steal my socks, my husband's socks, or each other's socks, or something just gets put in the wrong pile. I tend to have, and I don't know if this is going to stay the same for us this year, but I tend to have all black socks for everybody. And the reason I do all black socks is because you can't see if they're stained. They don't turn gray like white socks can. If you're not separating your whites, which I am not, because I'm not doing the laundry, they're doing the laundry, and I'm not making them separate whites. So they don't end up with gray socks, and you can't see any stains, and it's kind of easy to pair them. They don't have to go, this one doesn't match that one. They all pair really well. So even if they're not technically the same brand, it still will look pretty much the same. So that's what we do for now. It may change. Ideally, I would love to have a different color coded pair of socks per person, so that way I will know whose socks are whose, because that's part of the confusion that causes somebody's socks to end up in the wrong room or the wrong drawer, because everybody's got black socks. So my older two sons, so I have two sets of sons. I have an older set and a younger set, and the older set are 2 years apart, so their clothes are just about the same size, and the younger set are 2 years apart, their clothes are about the same size. So sometimes the older two mix up their clothes and the younger two mix up their clothes, but it usually doesn't mix across because there's a gap of about 5 years between the older set and the younger set. So anyway, that's a bit about socks. So underwear, kind of same thing. Obviously we're going to make sure they have enough for 2 weeks worth at camp. Shirts, I count all the shirts, and we go through their shirts. I look for anything that's stained or has holes, and that sort of thing. Usually if it's like a stain that I can get out or they can get out, it's already been gotten out. So by that point, it is just kind of a work shirt, we might call it. My older sons have a mowing business, a side hustle. So, you know, they might need a stained or dirty, not dirty, that's the wrong word, but stained or, you know, imperfect shirt for that sort of work, obviously. But I don't want to count that as part of their usable clothing because that's for special occasions. And it's easy to get a stained shirt. So, i.e. we don't have to plan for that. It just happens. It's organic. Next, I counted their shorts. I made sure they were all the right size. Same thing for now. Sometimes I do both seasons, spring and fall, at the same time and just try to do all my purchasing at once. But this year I have just packed up their long pants, and I counted how many there were sometimes, but I didn't really super keep track. I'm going to keep my eye out for some long pants for my oldest. I'm not trying to meet a specific number for him yet because he could grow. Next, they wear a uniform to school, so I do check their uniforms because there is a resale group on Facebook for our school's uniforms, and so I can keep my eye in that group to see if something comes up, because the price difference between buying it for new, you know, monogram from Lands' End and buying it used on Facebook is substantial. So I definitely want to keep my eye out for those uniform components. I also look at school shoes. So they have two kinds of shoes they need for school. They have a special dress shoe that's supposed to be for certain days, and then they have the regular shoes. And then they, in our family, I like them to have a pair of dirty tennies, that, you know, something that they can do the mowing in and not, what's the word I'm looking for? Not ruin their nice school shoes. So we have two pairs of tennies for that. And then they need a river shoe because we have a lot of rivers around here. I take my kids to the river. So they need a sandal that has straps on, you know, holds your foot in, not like a Croc or like a flip-flop, you know. I'm okay if they have those, but I don't actually usually go buy those. If they are showering in, like, you know, shower shoes, they use the river shoes for the shower because then they get to wash the river shoes. So we just try to keep things very low, like minimalistic-ish. You know, we're obviously not minimalists. I have 4 kids. It's hard to be even sort of minimalistic with 4 kids. I know some people are doing it. Hats off to them. I am not there yet. So for us, and what works for our family, is that they have at least those 4 pairs. Now, they can have some more, but if they have too many more, I tend to downsize. So I have his list, and anything that needed purchasing, I circled it, or I put an arrow, and then I put their size next to it. Now, sometimes I take a picture of these different lists, and I just bring the pictures with me into the store. Anyway, so then, let's see. We also need a pair of jeans, usually, for each child, because my older kids don't prefer jeans. So I buy them a pair so that they have them. There are certain activities that require jeans, and so they each have a pair. Anyway, so then my younger kids do wear pajamas, and I try to have it be at least 2 pairs of pajamas for them. But they tend to have more, and I don't minimize that. Anyway, so We do pass down clothes. So a lot of my second-born's clothes were my first-born's clothes, but what has happened to us lately is that my oldest son and my second-born, who are teenagers, are now the same size. And so I ended up having to buy more clothes for my second-born because my first-born's still wearing his clothes. He hasn't outgrown them. They don't need to be passed down. And so now I'm buying clothes separately for the second-born. My third, he tends to pass down to my fourth, obviously. Sometimes we keep stuff between my second and my third, but there is that 5-year gap. And so if I think something, might not be in style in 5 years, then I tend to pass it on. So, that's what we do there. But I do keep some other stuff. And of course there is, they have different body shapes and they're different, heights, length of torso, length of legs. So there are some things that I know just aren't going to pass down from my second born to my third, because my second tends to be very tall, very thin, and my third tends to be about average height, and his legs aren't particularly long, whereas my second born, his legs are longer. Anyway, so, and then there's also preferences as far as they go. Some prefer tighter clothes and looser clothes and what have you. But I do pass down what I can, so that does save us quite a bit of money. Let me see where I'm at with third. Okay, he has most of the clothes that he needs. There were just a couple things I needed to buy. And then my fourth, pretty much the same thing. I might need to get him a few little things, but overall they have what they need. And between ages, on my third and my fourth, my third, I might keep a little extra clothing for him in whatever size. If my minimum amount of shirts, which I call a week's worth, 10 shirts, because they're kids. And sometimes they spill their ice cream on the front and they need an outfit change in the middle of the week or the middle of the day. And I don't want to have to do laundry every 6 days instead of every 7. And obviously not me, but still. So I keep a little, about 10 is what I consider a week for shirts. 5 to 7 is what I consider a week for pants, because jeans can be worn twice. They just can, usually. And then shorts in the summer, 7 to 10, just because it's summer. And so sometimes we go to the river and they get their shorts wet, from what have you. And of course they all have swimsuits, so, but they already have those, and so I'm not shopping for those today. I tend to know what they have with the swimsuits because we use them fairly often. So, but if we have an impromptu river visit, that's kind of what I'm talking about, as far as getting their shorts dirty. Or maybe they spill ice cream on the shorts. So anyway, those are all possibilities, as those of you with kids know. Anyway, so now that I've looked through this, what I do is there are 3 ways I shop. There are 3 places I shop, basically. My ideal place to find clothes is yard sales. And that is because people will sell, if you find a good yard sale, they'll sell clothes for 50 cents to $1 per item. I have difficulty finding that price point in any other place I shop, consistently finding that price point. So yard sales are where my first choice. But obviously with camp coming up, my timeline's really short, so I'm not going to be able to hit up enough yard sales to make sure I have it, because obviously that's a hit or miss proposition. And while it's fun and good to find what I'd like at a yard sale, and obviously my preference, it is that hit or miss. You're not quite sure if they're going to have what you need or the size you need or what they're going to charge for what they have. Because other yard sales, they're charging boutique prices. And so, that's not going to be a thing I'm doing because it's a yard sale and I'm not paying boutique prices at a yard sale. I can find it cheaper elsewhere. So, first off was yard sales. Now, or hand-me-downs from friends. I do have some friends, one in particular whose kids are slightly larger. Her younger kids are slightly larger than my younger kids, I should say, because she doesn't have kids older than my older kids. she tends to pass on clothes to me, and I obviously use those. So that would be the first part, and that's part of why I do the inventory, is just to see where the gaps are at. You know, did a bunch of shirts get ripped or whatever, or have holes, and we just need to you know, fill in those gaps. So, but that's step one. Step two, which is where I'm at today, is the thrift shop. And so there are a bunch of thrift shops in our area, and we're really blessed in that. I live in an area that has about 500,000 people in it, and growing. So we have quite a few options. Different, they're not all close together, but obviously I'm shopping for an entire season's worth of clothes for all 4 kids. I'm not everything, but just in general, I'm shopping for the summer season for 4 kids. So I'm okay with driving a little bit to go to where I need to go, because I've already calculated the cost of gas. Anyway, and I save the cost of the drive with 1 item, usually. So my second stop is thrift shops, and those tend to cost about, I would say, $2 to $3 an item, depending on the item. I tend to not want to spend more than that, because we would get into the pricing in my third shop, which is Walmart clearance. I tend to shop Walmart clearance or other clearances. Sometimes I do buy things new. Obviously underwear, you know, I'm going to buy that new. I'm not getting that at the thrift shop, but things that I don't need to get brand new, I can find here for less than Walmart. But if it starts getting to be about the price of Walmart, then I'm going to scooch on over there. And I mean, when I'm thrift shopping around here, and I know this may not be true for everywhere, but I tend to find really good name brands. So, you know, Under Armour or things like that, Nike. There's quite a bit of that locally. And so if I find that, you know, I might pay a little extra for that if I'm seeing that particular type of thing, because I know the quality is going to be better than Walmart. And it might last through a couple of kids versus just the one. I feel like Walmart tends to be where I get, if my youngest needs something, I tend to buy it there if I can't find it cheaper somewhere, you know, because it's only going through 1 kid, and I don't need it to last for 2 or 3 because he's the last. So anyway, that is my clothes shopping methodology. Like I said, I do this twice a year. Usually in the spring. I'm actually really late doing it this year, but we had some really chilly days in May, and so I wanted to wait to put up all their winter clothes, because at the same time as I'm counting all their summer clothes and pulling all those out, I'm also putting away all the winter clothes and getting them ready for, you know, winter when it comes up. So I will pull these things out again. Probably I will grab the school clothes. I tend to put those on top of the winter clothes in my storage system, so that way I can just pull those uniforms off the top and then leave everything else untouched. And then, you know, when it gets to be cold around here, which usually happens around October, I will pull out the winter clothes and start that cycle over again. And when I get done with my 4th clothes, you know, I can find another place for those to live. So that is my methodology. I hope that's helpful to someone. If you have some other tips or ideas or thoughts, you feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm always looking for new insights. I learned a lot through my years on YouTube as a mom. I even learned from another mom, Real Solutions was the channel, and she said, don't combine your kids' laundry. I used to wash all 4 kids. I just throw it all in one bucket. Well, you throw them all together, you have to separate them all out, and then you can put them away. Instead of doing that, I make sure everybody has their own basket, and everybody washes their own clothes now. But back then, when they weren't all old enough to wash their own clothes, they all had their own basket so that nobody's clothes got combined, and it made life so much easier for me. And so I am thankful for her channel and the advice she gave. And so I would love any advice that you might have as far as how to do this well. So thank you so much for watching, and feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you soon.